So remember what we signed when y'all came in? And security cameras were on there, and there was security that you didn't even see that was there watching. And y'all said, hey, we're here to promote mutual understanding, sharing the best practices, and maintaining civil discourse. Civil discourse. We're here because we respect diverse points of view, even when strong disagreement exists on the core issues at hand. Today, this becomes even more meaningful. We're here because we acknowledge that all beef production systems can make contributions towards improved sustainability. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We're glad you're all here, and we're glad you're all here in this spirit, and this is going to be fun. It's going to be more fun than any other conference, probably, I think, in Copenhagen. I wasn't there, but I think this will be more fun. So we talk about that triple bottom line piece, right? And we talk about and we frame it up, and it's pretty simple. Economic prosperity, overlapping with environmental integrity, and overlapping with social equity. And what's that look like? You got a sweet spot right in the middle, a spot of convergence that occurs. But look at all the space around it that doesn't converge. So there's going to be plenty to disagree about. There's going to be plenty to challenge each other with. So keep this lens in your mind of thinking, what do we have in common? Where does this overlap occur, and what does that look like that can work for us together moving forward after we share our knowledge, gain a better understanding, and think about how it can translate into meaningful actions. Meaningful actions will not occur until there's an appreciation and respect for each other. Guarantee. So we had a meeting out in Washington, D.C. that the World Wildlife Fund graciously hosted, and the partners involved in this whole system sponsored for us to take place, and it was a Beef LCA working group, and there were 60 global stakeholders from very diverse perspectives, again, and including some brilliant minds that are here today, some that aren't, but others that might not even be as brilliant in certain measurements, but geniuses in their own right. We all got together and we had a desired outcome of sharing knowledge, gain understanding, identify key issues associated with a beef LCA, talk about how we could frame that up and move it constructively forward in some next steps. It was an incredible meeting. In that meeting, we determined that a beef LCA life cycle analysis or life cycle assessment can deliver science-based measurements and that can be used to help us monitor situations. It can be appropriate or inappropriate. And the best analogy that came forward was a descriptor of, it's like a hammer. For doing some things, it can be incredibly effective and the perfect tool. But for doing other things, it can be incredibly destructive and inappropriate. It can be based on common language. It can do that. It can, and it really needs to. It can have significant limitations and variation among them because of, for many reasons, some of them, the methodology to create that LCA and the data that was used to populate it. Two basic types. Yes, sir. Eric. Thank you very much. Life cycle analysis or life cycle assessment, but I would be a fool to try and do that with all the brain power that we have in the room. Who would like to help us with that? A working person's definition. Please? Help? Yeah, Scott Kaufman, please. Scott was present at our Beef LCA working group meeting. He was also participated in the follow-up tour that we'll talk briefly about in September out to see the whole entire beef industry. Scott, please.
A life cycle analysis is basically you take a supply chain for any product or service. You add all of the resource and material and energy inputs to each step of that stage, of each stage of the life cycle. And you sum up the emissions outputs, and you interpret it in terms of environmental impact.
Thank you very much, Scott. Any additions or comments? Yeah? Good? Good to go. Awesome. So it can be a top-down analysis or a scan, if you would, or it can be a bottom-up analysis that aggregates a bunch of information and then builds it up to a number or a series of numbers, if you would. It can support cost-effective and collaborative decision-making. It's trying to take subjectivity out of some of these decisions that we're making when it comes to real important things to society. And it's helping to determine the potential outcomes and consequences resulting from decisions. In other words, you should be able to say, if we are here with the current status and current state of affairs, and we modify the information that comes into it, what is the output and what is the result? Is it a positive? Is it a negative result? In which areas? Okay? The group decided that beef LCAs should include all relative impacts, not just greenhouse gas emissions, not just water. To be truly functional, we were told by some of the world's leading LCA experts that you can build these to be very effective tools for other issues other than those areas that include social dynamics, that include economic dynamics associated with the environmental dynamics. Okay? But really, you need to have a common database, an open source, if you would, so that not everybody's pigeonholing, well, we use this numbers over here, and they plug them in over there, and da-da. Poof, 7. And these guys, 9.5. That doesn't help. Got to all work together. The reason you're all here is you want to collaborate. You want to work together. So there are ways that we can use a common database. We can build that. And there are efforts underway that some of you are much more attuned with helping us understand what those mean and that we can be supportive of. And if we have one voice coming towards that, how shocked do you think some people would be? Well, yeah, I got a call from this guy and this lady and this guy and that lady, and they said that they're all for this. And they're like, what in the heck? How'd they ever come together? Well, we had a party out in Denver. It needs to be unique to the beef supply system, but it can be global in respects and then be able to be narrowed down into localized regional and other granularity. It needs to be readily accessible to multiple stakeholders. There needs to be transparency in all the input assumptions, the relative sensitivity, and the confidence levels of the outputs. So in other words, if you did get poof, a 7, and the confidence level were something that said, well, it could be 1 or it could be 13, but 7, well, how confident are you? That's my simple way of explaining that. I don't know if that's accurate, but ask somebody who's a lot smarter than me. So 99% of the population in this room. Framework criteria. So we said that we need to build an issues framework to be able to move forward together on this, in this critical discussion, knowing where we came from with this beef LCA discussion. And that this framework has to be focused. It has to be science-based. It has to carry that triple bottom line lens, economic prosperity, environmental integrity, social equity. It has to carry that forward. It has to be strong. It has to be robust so that it can help the dialogue move forward. If it's fragile and busts apart, that won't work. It has to include the ability to say, well, we work with these best practices to achieve those outcomes and think about that. But it can't be prescriptive in that respect. Because the people that are involved throughout the chain, and not just production, it's the whole chain we're talking about. All the way up to the consumer, right up to them. And in some respects, it has to include them. It has to be flexible so that we can talk about the different sectors as we move through. And it has to be able to have those unique characteristics according to regional specificity that we heard very clear, that while there are some commonalities, there are some incredibly huge differences relative to where the systems are based on their life cycle, if you would. Some systems are hundreds of years old, or, well, over 1,000 years, hundreds of years old, and others are much more immature. So we talked about that, and key takeaway was some next steps. Hey, let's have another tour. Let's have a tour out there so that the people who don't eat, sleep, breathe the production system that are around that table so they can get a flavor of it. It's not going to give them everything soup to nuts that they really need, but at least it'll put their toe in the water. Let's have a second meeting after November, after we're here right here, and let's have it outside the United States, because the world does not revolve around the U.S. And let's refine these key impacts as we move forward. In other words, these issues that we had framed up. And let's talk about and look at where these regional gaps occur in this information as we move forward with LCAs. And let's have regional plans to fill those gaps, and let's create open source database. So this is a wish list, guys. It's a wish list. We did a September tour. We had 27 very diverse stakeholders come on out here. And we spent a day in the bus and working our way through the entire system. We saw the Safeway Retail Distribution Center. We saw the Fort Morgan plant of Cargill's. And we saw the Cooner Feed Yard. And then we saw a development site where a gasifier is actually taking manure and turning it into energy. The whole thing, there were elements throughout this that were impressive and that all pointed towards the future saying, but that's not good enough, we're going to do better, we're going to do better, we're going to do better. And we saw Aristocrat Seed Stock Ranch, beautiful perspective, gorgeous perspective of this. Key takeaways, there's challenges and trade-offs in this triple bottom line. You push a balloon in one side, it comes out the other. I don't care what you say or what you do, there's an effect. There's an unintended or possibly an intended consequence across this triple bottom line approach. There are opportunities for innovation galore. Tons of them. Almost too many. There are as great evidence of pre-competitive collaboration or non-competitive collaboration. We saw it yesterday with Jerry O'Callahan and Brian Deerlum sharing the podium in a very tremendously ethical approach to saying, how do we work better for the good of the industry that we serve and the stakeholders that we serve? There's a critical nature of the beef system being aligned and it's focused. It must be able to focus on few things and do them well. And nothing comes without time and money. So this isn't a magic wand. It was healthy. People really got a lot out of it. There was some tension at times around discussions, but it was really fun discussions.